Hi everyone, and welcome to this video, which is the first one in a new series on love and relationships poetry. This is part of the AQA anthology for GCSE. Now today we're looking at a poem called Neutral Tones, which is by Thomas Hardy, and I'm just going to show you first of all where it fits into the anthology. I've divided the poems into 4 categories. So we've got family, friendship, only one poem about friendship, and I don't know what that says about the anthology, romance, and then a couple of poems about romantic obsession. And Neutral Tones fits into that romance category. But unfortunately, it's a poem about the end of a relationship rather than the start of one. Before we really get into it, I want to build our vocabulary a little bit so that we can talk about this poem really accurately. So can you stop the video, draw the arrow into your books, so across the page, and write negative on one end and positive on the other end, and then start the video again when you are ready to go. Okay, so I've got a list of words here on the screen, and these are all words that we can use to describe the tone or the emotion or the idea behind a poem. So stop the video again for about 2 minutes and copy the words from the box onto the relevant part of the arrow. So for example, the word optimistic is a really positive word, so we're going to put that at the right hand of the arrow. Okay, so take about 2 minutes, put as many of the words as you can onto your arrow, and then start the video again and we will go through them. Here we go then. So optimistic, exuberant, we might know that from talking about Mr. Fezziwig in A Christmas Carol. Idyllic, which is a word that means really calm and tranquil and peaceful. Nostalgic, I've put here on the positive end. Some of you might have put that more negative, and that is absolutely fine. Nostalgic means that you're looking back kind of longingly to the past. And that could be a really positive thing. It could be about your positive memories of the past, or else it could be you thinking, actually, I really miss what happened then. I really miss that person or whatever. So you might have put it more towards the negative end, and that's fine. Fulfilled, I would have as positive. It means that you're really kind of happy, you feel a sense of achievement and of success. Resolute is pretty determined. I've put that kind of in the middle because being determined could be inspired by a negative feeling. You might be going through something and you need to be really determined to get through it. Whereas actually the outcome of it is quite a positive thing because then you can overcome a challenge. Unconventional means challenging the stereotypes, standing up to things. Again, I've put that in the middle because it could be a product of a negative situation. If you think about women under the patriarchy, women were unconventional when they stood up against female stereotypes. Well, that's coming from a negative situation, even though it might be a positive action. So I've put that in the middle. Uncharted territory is a word that we use to talk about walking away, which is one of the poems in the anthology, and also Mother Any Distance. And that's about new experiences, going on adventures, discovering new things in life. It's in the middle on my chart because it could be a really daunting, fear-inspiring experience. Going off and doing something new can be a real challenge. But actually, ultimately, even if that's difficult, it leads to positive outcomes. So I've put that in the middle. Monotonous, if you think of that prefix mono, that means one, like a monorail. So monotonous means boring, mundane. So I've put that more towards the negative. Apprehensive is about being nervous. Solitary, well, I put that down as negative because I think most people think of being solitary, being isolated, being alone as a negative thing. I actually quite like being on my own sometimes, but anyway, we'll put it as a negative. Resentful is when you're really holding on to a grudge and you do not want to let that go, so I put it as a negative. And bitter is quite similar. You're really holding on to something that someone has done that's hurt you, and you can't move on from that situation. And actually, that word bitter is one that we're going to use a lot to talk about today's poem, Neutral Tones. But before we do that, one more question on our word line. Where does the word neutral go on this line? Where would you put it? So just take a second to think about where it would go. Right, hopefully you've said in the middle somewhere because neutral is halfway between positive and negative. We could also use the word indifferent to talk about feeling fairly neutral about something. Okay, let's look at the poem then. So Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy. We stood by a pond that winter day. and the sun was white as though chidden of God, and a few leaves lay on the starving sod, they had fallen from an ash and were grey. Your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing, alive enough to have strength to die, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby like an ominous bird a wing. Since then, keen lessons that love deceives and rings with wrong have shaped to me your face and the God-cursed sun and a tree and a pond edged with greyish leaves. Okay, I'll break this down for you. So here's the first stanza. We stood by a pond that winter day. That's fairly straightforward. We have the speaker and the girl that he's in love with, and they're standing by a pond in the middle of winter. Fine. Second line, the sun was white as though chidden of God. Now, normally the sun would be yellow, particularly in summer, but in winter you've often got that really kind of white, really pale sunlight. It's really not very strong. It's not providing much warmth. So while we would usually associate the sun with bringing life and joy and happiness and warmth to our lives, this sun really doesn't. So we've got a real sense of negativity introduced here in the poem. And the word chidden means to be rebuked or to be told off about something. So it almost seems as if God has cursed this landscape. So while the first line seems really positive, it starts with the pronoun we, the couple seem to be together, they're out for a nice walk together. Actually, the second line juxtaposes with that and it seems really negative. Then we have the leaves that lay on the starving sod. Now it's winter, so all the leaves have fallen from the trees, they're lying on the ground and they're starting to decay. This word sod here means earth, and starving obviously means hungry. Well, how can the earth be hungry? Well, it can be hungry if it's lacking nutrients, for example. So this again seems like a landscape which should be somewhere beautiful. It should be idyllic, but actually it's really quite bleak. And the final line from this stanza tells us where these leaves come from. They had fallen from an ash and were grey. Now, an ash is a type of tree. They're grey, so a neutral colour, as the title suggests. It doesn't bring much hope or much positivity to the poem. In the second stanza, then, the speaker says that your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago. So he's talking to his ex-lover here. And she seems to be looking at him, but as she's looking at him, her eyes are moving. So rove means to travel or to move. So her eyes are moving around the place. She's not making direct eye contact with him, which is a clear sign that a relationship isn't going very well. She's not gazing lovingly into his eyes anymore. And these eyes rove over tedious riddles of years ago. Well, tedious means boring. We talked about the word monotonous a couple of minutes ago. So she seems to be finding him quite dull. And then he says, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. So there's only some words between them. This is not the intense conversation of lovers. This is not people having an in-depth discussion about their life and what's happened in their day and their emotions. This is a couple who really don't have much to say to each other anymore because they're breaking up. The third stanza then, the smile on your mouth was the deadest thing. Right, here you've got to imagine the kind of smile that you know is quite fake. This is not a real smile, and there's not really much positive emotion behind this. Second line here, he says it was alive enough to have strength to die. So there was just enough love left in this smile to be reminded just how much he's lost, because that smile is dying, that love is dying. And then he says a grin of bitterness swept thereby. Well, bitterness, we talked about already, is where you really hold on to something that's hurt you. So the girl that he's talking to, who's breaking up with him, seems to be full of bitterness. Something has gone deeply wrong in this relationship. We never find out what that is, but there's a real problem here at the core of this kind of, well, I was going to say love relationship, but it's not really anymore given that they're breaking up. And then the final line in this stanza, an ominous bird a wing. So ominous means something really threatening. So whilst we would normally associate birds with freedom and escape and transcending kind of difficulties in life, this particular bird is ominous. It's suggesting that something bad is going to happen, which it is because they're breaking up. The final stanza then, since then, keen lessons that love deceives. So here the speaker really shifts their focus. The first three stanzas, they've been having a flashback to the situation where the girl broke up with them, and now they are thinking bigger. What can they learn from this breakup? And what they learn is that love deceives, love tricks people, it leads people on and then stabs them in the back. And he thinks that all you can gain from love is kind of suffering. He says that in the second line, it rings with wrong. Imagine wringing out a damp cloth or something, and the speaker feels as if he's been emotionally wrung out by this breakup. He talks about your face, and then he goes back to the start of the poem, the God-cursed sun. Remember that opening stanza, chidden of God, the God-cursed sun, the tree, a pond edge with greyish leaves. So again, we've got this sense of decay. Okay, all the way through the poems, we talk about a key concept, which is that love can transcend challenges. And my question for you with this poem is, does this apply to neutral tones? So when we think about love transcending challenges, we're thinking about how love can overcome challenges, whether it's distance, whether it's arguments, whatever the challenge is in a relationship, that love is strong enough for the couple or the mother and the child or the father and the child or the friends or whatever to overcome that situation. Okay, so stop the video, have a little think. Does this concept apply to neutral tones? Yes or no, and why do you think that? And then start the video again when you're ready. Well, okay, your answer is probably not. This is a breakup. The speaker feels incredibly bitter. They're not getting back together. So this particular concept is a bit of a stretch for this poem. So instead, for our key concept, we're going to think about how this poem talks to us about the pain of separation from a loved one. So that would be a better key concept to talk about in this poem. Right, let's get into annotating then. So make sure you've got your anthology or copy of the poem in front of you. And we're going to start by annotating the title. So stop the video, take a minute or so just to jot down your thoughts about the title, and then start the video again when you're ready. Right, here are my ideas then. Neutral essentially means indifference. This is emotional detachment. The relationship has ended. I suppose we could say that the girl who's doing the breaking up is emotionally detached. She's neutral, she's indifferent towards the speaker of the poem. Or maybe the speaker of the poem has been through so much that he is becoming neutral to the relationship, or he's going to be neutral to all relationships in future. It also suggests a sense of lifelessness, of monotony. Monotony, remember, means boredom, and the death of the relationship. Right, your next task then is to divide the poem into sections. So what I want you to do is literally read the poem again and maybe think about it in 3 different sections and draw a line on the page where those divisions would be. If you want to wait for my answers or my suggested answers for this, what I would suggest you do is that you draft your sections on a bit of paper first or on your whiteboard first, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, next thing I want you to do then is to label each section. So what is each of your sections about? So take another minute to do that and then start the video again when you're done. And here we go, here are mine. So I've taken the first stanza as a section on its own, and I've given that the subheading together with a question mark, because it starts with this idea, we stood by a pond that winter day. It seems as if there's some sense of togetherness, there's some sense of possible hope for the relationship there. Then my second section is going to be the second and the third stanza. I've entitled this as being all about endings. This relationship is dying, she's bitter, this is ominous, it's not going to restart. And then my final section I've labelled as bitterness. So the speaker is really holding on to the hurt that she caused him, and he can't move on from this breakup. Your next job then is to think about the images. So I've highlighted them for you on this poem. So pause the video, annotate each of the images that I've highlighted, take a couple of minutes to do that, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, I'm going to talk you through them then. So first of all, we're thinking about the pond. Now, you might be thinking ponds are full of water. Water is usually associated with life, with a fresh start. We think about water to do with baptism. So if you've done Macbeth already, you might be thinking about how the Macbeths are always trying to wash their hands and wash away the blood so that they can be released from sin and have a new start. Okay, so normally we think about water in that sense. However, this is a pond, and pond water stagnates, especially if there's no fresh water, no stream kind of running into it and cleansing the water. So we're thinking about a sense of stagnation here, and therefore the pond symbolizes a lack of progression, stillness, endings. This is a really negative image, something that should be positive but has been made negative because the breakup has kind of cast its shadow over all of the speaker's experience. The next one then is winter. So we've got a winter day. Now, winter pretty much always symbolizes endings, pain, suffering, and stasis. Now, stasis might be a word you're not familiar with. You can also think about it if you use the adjective static. You might know what that means. But stasis and static mean that something is still. It's not moving anywhere. So if we think about this poem as a whole, we've got the pond where the water isn't moving anywhere. We've got the leaves that are just lying on the ground. They're not moving anywhere. Also, the relationship's not moving anywhere. So all of the images in the poem are to do with stasis, with stillness, with not being able to progress. The next image then is the fallen leaves. So leaves have fallen on the ground. It's the end of the kind of summer cycle for the tree, which is to do with endings, with pain, with suffering, with decay, with death. It's a really negative image that we have in this particular poem. And this contrasts with lots of the positive natural images we have in the other poems in the anthology. If you've looked at Sonnet 29 already, in that particular poem, love is blossoming at the same time as the vines wrapped around a tree are blossoming. Whereas in this poem, love is dying and the natural world is dying as well. The ominous bird then, so at the end of that third stanza, well, you might be thinking, birds, right, I know about that. Birds in flight symbolize freedom and escape. Think about a poem like Mother Any Distance, where we have the kite up in the sky. The kite is free, it's liberated. That's about the child trying to escape the mother. You might think about Walking Away, where the half-fledged bird is getting ready to fly to escape from the kind of constraints of his parents and to carve his own path in life. However, this bird is an ominous one, and we do know again from Macbeth that some birds are harbingers of doom. So in Macbeth we have a raven that croaks Duncan's fatal entrance into the Macbeth castle. So this particular bird, the ominous bird, seems to foreshadow endings. Like the pond, like the leaves, like the tree, it should be a positive image, but in some way it is being corrupted by the speaker's emotions about his breakup. Okay, last one, the pond. Again, you might be saying, well, what we've got here is circular structure. So we'll come right back full circle to the pond at the end of the poem. And what do we know about circles? Well, they all go in circles. They return again and again to the same point. There's no progression, there's no movement forward. So when we talk about circular structure, we normally think about how the speaker or the characters are trapped and they're unable to progress emotionally. Right, next job, can you stop the video and circle all of the verbs that you can find? Remember, a verb is an action word or a doing word, so I'll give you a clue. The first one is stood, that is an action, they are standing by the pond in that first line. Okay, so stop the video, find the verbs for me, and then start it again when you're ready. Okay, here are the answers then. I've not picked out every single verb, but I've picked out the main interesting ones in the poem. So stood in line 1. Line 3, lay. Line 4, follow. Second stanza, the first line of the second stanza, rove, which means to move. The third line of the second stanza, played. If we go down to the third stanza, die and swept. And in the fourth stanza, deceives. And in that last line, edged. Okay, so these particular verbs then, what do they suggest to you? What do they all have in common? What kind of level of energy do they have, or what kind of movement do these verbs describe? Okay, so pause the video, have a bit of a think about that, start it again when you're ready. Okay, so what these verbs all have in common, or most of them have in common anyway, is a real lack of movement. They're all about stasis, lacking energy, and they're all about endings as well. If we just pick out a couple of them, think about that first one in that first line. We stood by a pond that winter day. Well, there's another poem in the anthology called Winter Swans where they're walking around the pond. So there's kind of a sense of movement, of energy there. In Climbing My Grandfather, it's all about the child strenuously climbing up his grandfather as if he's climbing up a mountain. Again, there's movement and there's energy there. In Follower, the father is ploughing the field. Again, there's a sense of kind of strength and energy and movement and dynamism. Whereas here, the couple are just standing by the pond. There's a real lack of energy at that point. Similarly, the leaves lay on the starving sod. Not even the leaves are doing anything. They're just lying there. There's not even any wind to blow them around. They had fallen. Again, that's about lacking energy. They lack the energy to move anywhere. They just fall on the ground straight from the tree. The things that do move, I suppose, if you wanted to contradict me, are the eyes that rove, the words that played between us, the grin of bitterness swept thereby. But it's not much energy there. Again, it seems to be pretty kind of dismal and pretty bleak in terms of the verb choices there. Right, we've talked about a lot of things, and you've probably annotated a lot of things in your anthology. So I want you to do a bit of consolidation now. Take 5 minutes to do this, and you're going to do some free writing. There are no rules to free writing, so it's not a P paragraph, it's not an essay. It's just a chance for you to process your thoughts and to get your ideas down onto paper. So there's no particular structure. You can use sentences, you could write it in a list, you could mind map it, whatever comes easiest to you. And I've got 2 questions to help you with this. So firstly, what is the poem about? And then secondly, what does the poem teach us about relationships? Okay, so thank you very much for listening and see you in the next video.